An elderly woman stopped to help three homeless children in the rain. Years later, she was stunned to discover who they really were. The squeaking of the windshield wipers kept pace with the storm. Claire Lambert adjusted the rearview mirror, her knobby fingers protesting the movement. The reflection she saw was the same as always: weary brown eyes, grey hair tied in a messy bun, wrinkles that told stories of 68 well-lived years. A flash of lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the deserted street. That's when she saw them, three small silhouettes huddled beneath the faded awning of an abandoned store. Claire pressed the brake, her heart pounding in her chest. The headlights of her small red Ford revealed the entire scene: an underweight boy holding two younger children, using a soaked piece of cardboard as an improvised umbrella. The creak of the car door vanished into the roar of the rain. Claire ignored the pain in her knees as she stepped out, clutching her blue knitted sweater, one she had finished last winter during lonely nights. Her floral umbrella trembled in her right hand as she crossed the street. The older boy, he couldn't have been more than 5, took a step back, pulling his siblings with him. His green eyes shone with a mixture of fear and defiance, his tiny hands trembling as he tried to protect the other two. "It's okay," Claire whispered, kneeling on the wet sidewalk. The water soaked through her wool pants, but she barely noticed. The smallest of the children, a dark-haired girl with hair plastered to her face like watercolor brushstrokes, was sobbing silently. The baby of the group, barely steady on trembling legs, clung to the older boy's thigh. His lips were turning purple, and a worn sandal dangled loosely from his right foot. Claire extended her blue sweater toward them. The oldest hesitated, his eyes darting between the sweater and the darkness behind him, as though expecting someone to step out of the shadows. "My house is 2 blocks away," she offered, her voice as gentle as a lullaby. "There's hot chocolate, and I believe I still have some cinnamon cookies." The little girl took a step forward, drawn by the promise of warmth, but her brother grabbed her wrist. The small one coughed, a harsh sound echoing through the empty street. "I'm a teacher. Well, I used to be," Claire continued, rain mixing with tears she didn't realize were falling. "My name is Claire." The oldest swallowed hard. I'm Thomas," he murmured, his voice almost lost in the drumming of the rain. "This is Sophie, and he's Paul." Thunder rumbled across the sky, and little Paul jumped in fear. Before Thomas could stop him, he stumbled toward Claire, tiny arms outstretched like a shipwrecked sailor seeking rescue. Claire wrapped him in the blue sweater, feeling his cold little body tremble against her chest. Sophie clung to the hem of Claire's skirt, leaving small, wet fingerprints on the fabric. Thomas, after one last glance at the dark street, finally came closer. The walk back to the car felt like an eternity. Claire turned the heater up to maximum, watching 3 little faces in the rearview mirror that looked like they'd just stepped out of a grim fairy tale. She began to hum a lullaby under her breath, the same one she used to calm her students on stormy days. Paul fell asleep before they reached the house, his breath fogging up the car window. Sophie fought off drowsiness, her head leaning against her brother's shoulder. Only Thomas remained vigilant, his green eyes studying Claire's every move. The house emerged from the curtain of rain like a lighthouse in a storm, an old 2-story home with blue shutters and a garden full of drenched hydrangeas. Claire carried Paul to the door while Thomas and Sophie followed like lost ducklings. The interior smelled of cinnamon and solitude. Claire turned on the lights, revealing a cozy living room with floral armchairs and shelves full of children's books. She went upstairs with Paul still asleep in her arms, guiding the other children to the bathroom, where an old clawfoot tub awaited. While warm water filled the bathtub, she rummaged through the hallway closet. She found soft towels and pajamas that once belonged to her grandchildren, gifts kept for visits that never happened. Paul woke up during his bath, his eyes wide as he stared at the yellow rubber duck Claire placed in the water. "Duck," he mumbled, his first word that night. Thomas insisted on helping his siblings, his small fingers gently lathering Sophie's hair. Claire noticed the bruises and scratches appearing beneath the dirt, her heart aching with each new discovery. In the kitchen, dressed in dry pajamas and soft socks, the children looked different. less like scared animals, more like what they truly were, little ones in need of love. Claire warmed up some milk, while Thomas helped Sophie climb onto a chair, placing a cushion so she could reach the table better. The aroma of chocolate filled the air. Mixing with the scent of cinnamon cookies Claire took from a floral tin on top of the fridge. She served the drinks in animal-themed mugs, a lion for Thomas, an owl for Sophie, a rabbit for Paul. "Careful," Thomas whispered to his siblings. "It's hot." Claire sat with her own mug, quietly observing. Paul had cookie crumbs all over his new pajamas, but his eyes sparkled with something beyond the light's reflection, maybe hope, or maybe just the momentary comfort of being warm and dry. At last, Thomas allowed his shoulders to relax as he sipped small gulps of hot chocolate. Sophie was humming softly as she dipped her cookies in her mug, and Paul fought sleep, his head bobbing forward and rising again at ever shorter intervals. Rain still beat against the windows, but inside that warm kitchen, under the soft glow of an old lamp, something new was beginning to form. Claire didn't know it yet, but that night would change not just 4 lives, but entire generations to come. For now she just watched, her heart filling with something she hadn't felt for a long time, a purpose. Outside how the storm raged on, but inside that kitchen, stories were being rewritten with hot chocolate, cinnamon cookies, and the kind of love that's born on stormy nights. The kitchen clock read 10 o'clock when Paul finally let his head droop onto the table, surrendering to sleep. His rabbit mug was still half full of chocolate, and cookie crumbs formed a small map on his borrowed pajamas. Claire watched as Thomas gently wiped his brother's face with a napkin. His small hands, marked by half-healed scratches, moved with a tenderness no 5-year-old should ever need to have. "Thomas," she began softly, "how long ago did your mother leave?" The boy froze for a moment, his green eyes fixed on the empty mug in front of him. "Mommy went to buy bread," he murmured, the words sounding rehearsed. "She'll be back soon." Sophie, who had been playing with the last cookie crumb, lifted her head. "I miss Mommy," her small voice trembled. "She's been at the bakery forever." Claire felt her heart tighten. She stood up slowly and began clearing the mugs, giving the children a moment. In the silence of the kitchen, she could hear the rain easing outside, turning into a persistent drizzle. "Let's get you a place to sleep," she suggested, noticing Sophie's heavy eyelids. "Tomorrow, we can look for Mommy again." Thomas nodded, but his tense shoulders betrayed his worry. As she carried Paul upstairs, Claire noticed how the older boy held his sister's hand tightly, as if afraid she might vanish too. The guest room, which for years had only stored memories, held a double bed and a sofa bed. Claire laid Paul down carefully, watching his breath form small puffs in the cold room. "Here." She handed Thomas a striped pajama she found in the back of the closet. "It used to be my grandson's. It might fit you." While helping Sophie change clothes, Claire couldn't help but notice the marks on her little arms, faded bruises that told stories the girl was too young to explain. Her hair, now dry, was uneven, as though hastily cut. "That's a pretty necklace," Claire remarked, noticing a thin chain around Sophie's neck. The girl touched the pendant hidden under her pajama. "It's Mommy's," she whispered. "She told me never to take it off." Thomas Yebak, who was finishing putting on his pajama in the corner of the room, gave his sister a warning glance. Claire pretended not to notice, continuing to make the bed with extra blankets. "You can sleep here," she indicated the bed where Paul was already lying. "I'll leave the hallway light on and my room is right next door." Sophie climbed onto the bed, crawling over to her younger brother. Thomas remained standing, his eyes scanning the room as if memorizing every detail, every possible exit. "It's safe here," Claire assured him, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Would you like me to tell you a story?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically, but Thomas shook his head. "I need to stay awake," he said, his small voice carrying a huge weight. "So I'll know when Mommy comes back." Claire felt tears burn her eyes, but she kept a gentle smile. "How about we make a deal? You rest a little and I'll stay awake. If your mom comes, I promise I'll call you first." Thomas hesitated, exhaustion wrestling with his resolve. Finally, after what felt like forever, he climbed into the bed, placing himself between his siblings and the door. Claire began to softly sing an old lullaby. Sophie soon fell asleep, her small hand clutching the hem of her younger brother's pajama. Thomas fought sleep a bit longer, his green eyes fixed on Claire until finally fatigue won out. In the stillness of the room, Claire studied the three small bodies curled up under the blankets. Paul sucked his thumb, a habit that seemed too late for his age. Sophie had calluses on her palms, as though she'd spent much time crawling on the ground. And Thomas slept like a soldier on watch, his body tense even in slumber. She rose carefully so as not to wake them and walked to the phone in the hallway. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the police station's number. With each ring, she glanced back at the bedroom door where three children slept the sleep of the exhausted. "Police department," answered a female voice. Claire took a deep breath. "Good evening. My name is Claire Lambert. I found three young children alone on the street." The conversation that followed was a blur of questions and answers. No, the children did not know their address. Yes, there were signs of neglect. No, they hadn't mentioned direct violence. Yes, she could keep them safe until morning. When she hung up, Claire leaned her head against the wall, letting the tears finally fall. From the bedroom, she could hear the children's soft breathing, a sound her home hadn't known in years. She returned quietly to the room, settling into the armchair by the window. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, with no stars in sight. In the darkness, the outline of the three sleeping children looked like a fallen nest, fragile, lost, but still fighting to survive. Claire picked up her knitting, the needles clicking softly as her hands began to work. That was how she spent her sleepless nights for years, knitting memories into sweaters and scarves that no one ever wore. But tonight was different. Tonight, for the first time in a long while, her knitting had a purpose beyond filling the silence. As her hands moved, her eyes never left the three small shapes in the bed, and her heart wove plans and promises she did not know if she could keep. Thomas stirred in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Claire froze, but he only snuggled closer to his siblings, his protective arm never leaving them. Outside, the city was beginning to awaken to a new day. But inside that room, time seemed suspended, as though the world had paused to give these three lost children a chance to simply be kids, even if only for one night. Dawn tinted Claire's kitchen with golden hues. The table still held traces of the previous night: cookie crumbs, dried chocolate stains, three smiling animal mugs waiting to be washed. Thomas was the first to wake. Claire found him standing at the top of the stairs, already dressed in his now dry clothes, his green eyes clouded with an understanding beyond his 5 years. "Good morning," she smiled, trying to ignore the heaviness in her chest. "How about breakfast before—" Her voice failed. Thomas just nodded, descending the steps in silence, his small bare feet making barely a sound on the wooden floor. Sophie woke soon after, dragging along the floral blanket Claire had lent her. Her messy hair framed a still sleepy face, but her eyes already bore that same shadow of awareness her brother carried. Paul was the last to wake. Claire found him curled up in the bed, clutching the rubber duck from his bath. "Grandma," he called, stretching his arms toward her, and Claire felt her heart break into 1,000 pieces. Breakfast was a silent meal. Claire made pancakes with chocolate syrup, a special breakfast she used to make for her students on field trip days. Thomas cut Paul's pancakes into small pieces, a gesture so natural it hurt to watch. "We need to go to the police station," Claire finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "To see if we can find your mother." Sophie dropped her fork, the metallic clatter echoing in the quiet kitchen. Thomas immediately took her hand under the table. "She'll come back," he murmured, more to his siblings than to Claire. "She always comes back." Claire swallowed the lump in her throat and started clearing the table. Her hands trembled as she stored the animal mugs, the lion, the owl, the rabbit. Christmas gifts never used, now forever marked by memories of a single night. On the drive to the station, Paul slept in the back seat, his head resting on Sophie's lap. Thomas kept his eyes glued to the window, as if memorizing the route. Claire gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to capture every detail of those final moments. The police station was a grey building that looked even colder under the morning light. A social worker was already waiting for them, a young woman with a gentle smile and a clipboard full of forms. "I'm Catherine," she introduced herself, kneeling to meet the children's eye level. "I'm here to help you find your mother." Paul hid behind Claire's legs, his small hands gripping her skirt. "Grandma," he sobbed, and each sob felt like a needle in Claire's heart. Thomas stepped forward, taking on his protector role. "We'll be okay," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for the hot chocolate." Claire knelt, opening her arms. To her surprise, Thomas was the first to hug her, his small, tense body finally letting go for a brief moment. Sophie joined the embrace, her silent tears wetting Claire's shoulder. "Here's my phone number and address." Claire handed a folded paper to the social worker. "Please keep me informed. And tell the kids they can come to me anytime." Catherine nodded, placing the paper in her folder. Paul was still crying, calling Claire Grandma, while the social worker gently picked him up. "I'll leave the rubber duck with you," Claire said, taking the toy from her purse. Thomas took it carefully, as though it was something precious. "Promise you won't forget us?" Sophie asked, her voice almost a whisper. Claire felt the tears she had held back finally overflow. "Never," she promised, knowing it was true. "I will never forget you." The next moments were a blur. Catherine led the children down a hallway, Paul still crying, Sophie waving timidly, Thomas holding the rubber duck like a treasure. The last thing Claire saw were three little backs disappearing through a door at the end of the corridor. Back in the car, Claire found the floral blanket Sophie had left on the back seat. It was folded awkwardly, in that way only a 4-year-old could fold. Beneath it lay a crumpled sheet of paper, a drawing done hastily with the colored pencils Claire kept on her kitchen table. 5 stick figures smiled from the page, 3 small ones, 1 tall figure with grey hair, and 1 more separate from the rest, with a big question mark where the face should have been. In the corner, in shaky letters that could only be Thomas's, it read, "Our family." Claire drove home on autopilot, the drawing safely tucked into her purse. Once home, the first thing she did was place the 3 animal mugs in a special spot on the shelf, not to be stored away but to be seen every day. The weeks turned into months. Claire called the social worker regularly, but the answers were always the same. No news of the mother. The children were in a safe place. They couldn't share more information. Eventually, the phone calls grew less frequent, then stopped altogether. The floral blanket remained folded at the foot of her bed, washed but never used. The drawing was framed and hung on her kitchen wall, where 5 stick-figure smiles remained frozen in time, an unfulfilled promise of a family that could have been. Every stormy night, Claire left a light on the porch and 3 mugs ready in the kitchen, a lion, an owl, and a rabbit. Somewhere in the city, 3 siblings slept with a yellow rubber duck, perhaps dreaming of hot chocolate and cinnamon cookies, and a grey-haired lady who, for one night, was their grandma. 15 years can pass in the blink of an eye, Claire thought, gazing at her reflection in the kitchen window. Her hair, once just flecked with white, was now completely silver. The wrinkles had deepened, etching stories of laughter and worries on her face. At 83, she moved more slowly, but her mind was as sharp as ever, especially regarding certain memories. On her shelf, 3 mugs remained untouched. A lion, an owl, and a rabbit, displayed exactly as on that night. She dusted them weekly, with the same care she gave to family photos. In her mind, those mugs were photos too, snapshots of a night that changed her life. "It's been 15 years, she murmured into the silence of her kitchen, pouring her morning tea. The cup she used was plain and white. The other 3 were too special for everyday use. Upstairs, in the guest room that rarely saw visitors, a bed remained neatly made with a floral blanket carefully folded at the foot. On top of it, a small brown teddy bear, worn by time and by Claire's frequent hugs. It was a simple bear, the kind you might win at a carnival machine, with a faded red ribbon around its neck. Paul had dropped it while the social worker was carrying him away. Claire only found it days later, hidden under the living room sofa. She tried to return it, of course, but the bureaucratic process felt like a glass wall. She could see through it, but couldn't get across. The morning followed its usual routine. Claire watered her plants, checked her mail, prepared her solitary breakfast. But every action was punctuated by thoughts and questions that had haunted her for 15 years. Was Thomas still the protector? Did Sophie still have her shy smile? Would Paul remember her, or would she be just a hazy childhood memory? Had they found their mother? On the kitchen wall, protected by a simple frame, Sophie's drawing remained intact. The colors had faded a bit, but the smiles remained, frozen in time like an unfulfilled promise. Claire kept a blue folder in her desk, organized chronologically. Inside were newspaper clippings about found children, archived police reports, letters sent to various institutions, all her frustrated attempts to find some clue about those 3 children's fates. Her friends had long since stopped trying to convince her to move on. How could she explain that some people enter our lives for just one night, but leave marks that last forever? On rainy days, especially on nights with fierce storms like that one, Claire still left the porch light on and made hot chocolate. The aroma of cinnamon filled the house like a familiar embrace, and for a moment, she could almost hear the sound of children's laughter echoing in the halls. Time had changed many things. The neighborhood wasn't the same. The abandoned store where she'd found the children had become a trendy cafe. The police station had a new address, and Catherine, the social worker, had retired years ago. But some things remained unaltered, like Claire's habit of stopping whenever she saw children alone on the street, or her tendency to collect newspaper clippings about young prodigies, hoping to see those 3 familiar green eyes. In the drawer of her bedside table, she kept the last official report she'd received, dated 10 years ago. "Case closed," read the cold words. But for Claire, nothing about that night could ever truly be closed. During her morning walks around the neighborhood, she often found herself studying the faces of the young people passing by. Any boy around 20 with dark hair made her heart skip a beat. Any girl with a timid smile made her pause, and whenever she heard someone call Grandma, she automatically turned her head, searching for a voice lost long ago in time. The small brown teddy bear was her silent confidant. Sometimes, on nights when the loneliness felt heavier, Claire would hold it and tell it stories she imagined about 3 children growing up somewhere safe and happy. Stories of Thomas becoming a strong, kind man, Sophie developing her talents, and Paul growing up secure and loved. In the bottom drawer of her dresser, a box held 3 wrapped gifts, one for each birthday she had never been able to celebrate. It was a tradition that started the first year after that night and never stopped. 15 gifts for each child, carefully chosen for the ages they would have been. For Thomas, books about courage and protection. For Sophie, art supplies to nourish her creativity. For Paul, educational toys to help him grow curious and smart. Gifts that would never be delivered, but which represented all the love Claire carried in her heart. In her planner, 3 dates were marked with small stars. The birthdays she assumed were theirs, based on the ages from that night. On each of those dates, she lit a candle and made a wish that wherever they were safe, happy, and well. The seasons passed, the years piled up, but the ritual remained the same. Every night before going to bed, Claire stood before Sophie's drawing on the kitchen wall. She gently touched each stick figure, whispering goodnight to each of them, to Thomas, the little protector, to Sophie, the quiet artist, and to Paul, the baby who called her grandma for one night. And every morning, her first thought was always the same. Could today be the day I find out? 15 years had passed in a blink, but for Claire, some memories were as vivid as that rainy night. The weight of Paul in her arms, the tentative touch of Sophie, the watchful gaze of Thomas, all preserved with the same care she gave the small brown teddy bear. Because some people pass through our lives like comets, brilliant, swift, unforgettable. And even 15 years later, Claire still looked to the sky each night, searching for that particular glimmer that once lit her life for just a few hours, yet continued to guide her through the years. The television murmured softly in Claire's living room, filling the late afternoon silence. She knitted absently, yet another scarf no one would wear, while the local news played. Her hands, now more gnarled at 83, moved with the familiar rhythm of the needles. "And now, an inspiring story of overcoming obstacles," announced the anchor. "Meet 3 young siblings who have revolutionized the shelter system for homeless children." Claire glanced up briefly, her hands continuing their automatic knitting. On screen, images of a modern building appeared, large windows and a well-kept garden. The Umbrella Project, founded by siblings Thomas, Sophie, and Paul Anderson, has helped more than 1,000 children in the past 2 years. The knitting needles slipped from her hands with a metallic clang. The camera focused on 3 young entrepreneurs. The oldest, a 20-year-old man with neatly trimmed dark hair, spoke with a demeanor that blended authority and kindness. His green eyes, those green eyes Claire had seen in her dreams for 15 years, still shone with the same protective spark. "Our mission is to ensure no child ever has to spend a night in the rain," Thomas told the reporter. His voice had changed, and of course, but it held that same determined tone Claire recalled from the 5-year-old boy protecting his siblings. Next to him stood a 19-year-old young woman, smiling shyly at the camera. Sophie had grown into a graceful young lady, her dark hair now neatly styled, yet Claire would recognize that hesitant smile anywhere. Then the camera showed Paul, 18, gesturing excitedly as he explained the shelter's educational program. His face had lost its childish features, but his eyes still held that curious sparkle Claire remembered from that distant night. "The name of the project comes from a childhood memory," Sophie explained. "One night, when we were lost in the rain, a lady offered us shelter under her colorful umbrella." Claire pressed trembling hands to her lips. On screen, Thomas continued, "We don't remember much about that night. We were so little. But we never forgot the sense of safety that single act of kindness gave us." The room began to spin. Claire groped blindly for the remote, turning up the volume with shaking fingers. "The idea of the Umbrella Project is just that," Paul explained, his smile lighting up the screen. "To provide not just a roof, but that same feeling of safety we experienced that night." The report then showed the interior of the shelter. The walls were painted bright colors, and in each room 3 decorative mugs, a lion, an owl, and a rabbit. "It's a tribute," Sophie said, touching one of the mugs. "We don't remember the lady's face, but we recall those mugs of hot chocolate." Claire could hardly breathe. Behind the siblings, a painting caught her attention, a large-scale replica of a child's drawing with 5 stick figures, the same one she still had on her kitchen wall. "This drawing," Thomas pointed out, "is the only concrete thing we have from that night. Our sister Sophie made it, and somehow we managed to keep it through the years." The camera zoomed in on the drawing, and Claire felt her heart stop. It looked different from hers. This one was more faded, with crease marks from being folded countless times, but it was unmistakably the same. "We never found out who that lady was," Paul added, his expression softening. "But wherever she is, we want her to know that her act of kindness not only saved 3 kids that night, but inspired a project that continues to save others." The report continued with statistics and interviews, but Claire barely heard them. Her hands shook so badly she dropped her knitting on the floor. She stood up with difficulty, her legs unsteady, and walked to the kitchen. There on the wall, Sophie's drawing smiled back at her. The same 5 stick figures, the same simple smiles, the same question mark where the 5th face should have been. She returned to the living room just in time to hear the project's address. With trembling hands, she grabbed her old notebook and wrote down every detail. The piece ended with one last image of the 3 siblings. Thomas still the protector, with an arm around each sibling's shoulder. Sophie holding a folder with the project logo, a colorful umbrella, and Paul, his eyes shining with that same childhood curiosity Claire remembered so well. And now, back to the weather report. Claire turned off the TV with shaking hands. The silence in the house was deafening. Slowly, as if in a dream, she climbed the stairs to the guest room. The small brown teddy bear was still there, sitting on the floral blanket she had carefully folded. Claire picked it up gently, her fingers tracing its faded red bow. "So this is who you've become," she whispered to the bear, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "My little heroes." On the muted television, the news droned on, oblivious to the miracle it had just revealed in an ordinary living room, to a silver-haired woman who had never stopped searching for 3 pairs of green eyes in every face she saw. Claire walked to her desk, where the blue folder held 15 years of searching. Carefully, she added a new page, the Umbrella Project's address, written in her shaky handwriting. She looked at the clock, almost 6 in the evening. Outside, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising another stormy night. Claire smiled through her tears, thinking of how many more children would find shelter tonight under the umbrella her 3 little angels had created. On her shelf, the 3 mugs, a lion, an owl, and a rabbit, seemed to glow in the fading light, as if they too knew their original owners had finally been found. Claire spent the night wide awake, her thoughts a whirlwind of memories and possibilities. At dawn, she found herself standing before her old oak dresser, pulling a dusty box from the back of the bottom drawer. Her hands trembled as she opened the box. The inside was lined with faded red velvet, storing old photographs and yellowed letters. On top was a black and white photograph showing 2 smiling young women in school uniforms, Claire and her best friend, Elizabeth. "Oh, Lizzie," Claire murmured, touching the face in the photo. "If you only knew." She kept searching the box until she found what she was looking for, a high school graduation photo of the school where she used to teach. In the front row stood a teenage girl with shining green eyes, smiling shyly at the camera. Marie Thompson, Elizabeth's daughter, her favorite student, the girl Claire had promised to protect. Claire closed her eyes as memories flooded her mind. Elizabeth had died young, leaving Marie at just 12 years old. On her deathbed, she made Claire promise to care for her daughter. "I promise, Lizzie," Claire had said, holding her friend's hand. "I'll take care of her like she's my own." For a few years, she kept that promise. Marie spent more time at Claire's house than at her own, filling the quiet halls with teenage laughter and hopes for the future. But then, something changed. Marie started drifting away, missing classes, avoiding Sunday get-togethers. A yellowed envelope caught Claire's eye. Inside was a final letter from Marie, dated 20 years ago. "Dear Claire, I'm so sorry for everything. You were more than a teacher. You were the mother fate gave me after I lost mine. But I made mistakes, so many mistakes. I'm pregnant and scared. By the time you read this, I will have left. Please don't look for me. With love, Marie." Claire let the letter fall into her lap, puzzle pieces clicking into place in her mind. The timing matched. Marie was pregnant, then 3 children. The same green eyes that reminded Claire so much of Elizabeth. With renewed urgency, Claire switched on her old computer, a gift from her students upon her retirement. Her arthritis-stricken hands typed slowly, searching for more about the Umbrella Project and its founders. The screen lit up with articles and interviews. Anderson Siblings Transform Social Care, Umbrella Project, a story of triumph, the young entrepreneurs changing lives. In a longer interview, she found what she'd been hoping for. Thomas Anderson, the oldest, spoke about their motivations. "Our mother, Marie Anderson, taught us the value of education and kindness, even under the harshest circumstances." Claire gasped. There it was, in black and white. Marie Anderson, formerly Marie Thompson, her Marie. She kept reading, heart racing. The siblings had been adopted after losing their mother to a terminal illness. Their adoptive father, a successful businessman, encouraged their entrepreneurial spirit. But it was their birth mother's memory that led them to focus on social causes. "Our mother was a teacher," Sophie mentioned in another interview. "She used to say she learned from her mentor that education is the key to changing the world." Claire covered her mouth with her hands, tears flowing down her face. Marie had talked about her to the children, passing on her lessons even after she was gone. With trembling fingers, she opened another drawer and took out a leather-bound journal. There she had collected newspaper clippings about missing children over the years. Among them was a short obituary she hadn't paid attention to at the time. Marie Anderson, 35, survived by 3 young children. The date. The obituary date was the day after that stormy night. "Oh, Marie," Claire sobbed, pressing the clipping to her chest. "You brought them to me. You knew I'd protect them." Then she recalled a detail from yesterday's news piece, the necklace Sophie wore during the interview, a small silver pendant Claire recognized anywhere. She had given it to Marie on her graduation day, a tiny owl symbolizing wisdom. The pieces kept falling into place, the siblings' commitment to education and social work, how the Umbrella Project prioritized keeping siblings together, the focus on educational support for vulnerable kids. Claire stood slowly, walking over to her bookshelf. Among worn volumes of classic literature, she found Marie's school class photo album. On the last page, a photo of the school theatre club. Marie in 16 beamed in her role as a fairy godmother, holding a colorful umbrella, identical to the one used now as her children's project logo. Her eyes wandered to the last photo she had of Marie, taken one spring Sunday. She was laughing, sitting on Claire's garden swing, her green eyes, the same eyes now seen in Thomas and Sophie and Paul, glowing with youth and hope. "You never stopped being my favorite student, Marie," Claire whispered to the photograph. "And your children, oh, they're just like you, strong, determined, compassionate." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Claire walked to the window, gazing at the street where, 15 years ago, a simple act of kindness had unknowingly connected 3 generations. In her mind, she saw Elizabeth smiling in her school uniform, Marie radiant at graduation, and now her grandchildren, for that's what they were, right, transforming the world with the same passion both mothers had displayed. Claire picked up her phone, hands trembling as she dialed the number from the news report. It was time to complete the circle, to finally keep the promise made to her best friend so many years ago. "Umbrella Project, good afternoon," answered a young voice. Claire took a deep breath. "Good afternoon, I'd like to speak with Thomas Anderson. Tell him it's about a stormy night, 3 mugs of hot chocolate, and a promise made long ago to a woman named Elizabeth Thompson." There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. Then, like an echo of the past meeting the present, the voice Claire had never forgotten, now deeper and more mature. "Hello? This is Thomas." "Claire?" Thomas's voice sounded different over the phone, deeper than in her dreams. You're her, aren't you? The lady with the umbrella." Claire gripped the phone tightly, seated in her favorite armchair. "Yes, Thomas, and there is so much you need to know." The conversation that followed lasted hours. Thomas put the call on speaker so Sophie and Paul could listen. Between tears and revelations, Claire finally learned the truth about that fateful night and the days that followed. "Our adoptive mother kept everything," Sophie explained, her voice choked with emotion. "Letters, documents, even the journal our birth mother kept in her final months." There was the sound of rustling papers over the phone. Paul, now a man but still with that childlike curiosity in his voice, began to read. "June 20th. The doctor gave me the news today. Terminal, 3 months at most. David's been gone just 4 months. And now this. I need to find a safe place for my angels before it's too late." Claire closed her eyes, imagining Marie writing those words, alone and frightened. Thomas continued reading. "June 25th. I looked into all possible adoptive families. The Andersons seem perfect. He's a businessman, she's a pediatrician. Most importantly, they promise to keep all 3 children together. But I need to be sure. I need to know they'll be okay." Sophie picked up another sheet. "This one is from the day she left us with you. July 10th. The pain is worse today. I can barely walk, but I have to do this. Claire was always more than my teacher. She was the mother I gained when I lost my own. I know she'll take care of them tonight. Give them enough time for the Andersons to be contacted. She has the kindest heart I've ever known. I hope one day my kids understand how much she means to me." By now, Claire's tears were flowing freely. Paul, his voice trembling, went on, "We found the medical report. Mom passed away the next morning at the Central Hospital. The social worker, Catherine, had already arranged everything with the Andersons. She knew Mom didn't have much time. The Andersons got us right away," Thomas explained. "Catherine called them that night, after you took us to the station. They came back immediately. They were angels too," Sophie added quietly. "Jane and Michael Anderson. They told us everything when we turned 18, how Mom had researched dozens of families until she found them, how she planned every detail." Claire took the old photo of Marie, tracing her smiling face with trembling fingers. "Your mother was extraordinary. She was my favorite student, you know? She had a special light in her eyes, the same one I see in all three of you. Her journal mentions you several times," Paul continued. "She wrote about how you inspired her to become a teacher too, how she kept the colorful umbrella she used in a school play." "That play!" Claire exclaimed. "She was the fairy godmother. She carried that umbrella through the entire performance. I have a photo of it here." A moment of emotional silence followed on the other end. Then Thomas spoke, his voice heavy with meaning. "That's why we chose the umbrella as our symbol. It's the clearest memory we have of that night, a colorful umbrella sheltering us from the rain." Claire learned that David, the children's father, had died in a car accident 4 months before that night. Marie was already ill but hid her symptoms until she couldn't anymore. When the final diagnosis came, she began to plan. She wrote letters for each of us, Sophie revealed, to be delivered when we turned 18. In mine, she talked about art, about how I was always drawing, even as a toddler. She said she kept a special drawing I made on a stormy night. "It's on my kitchen wall," Claire whispered. "I've never taken it down." Paul let out a soft laugh, mingled with tears. "My room has a shelf with 3 mugs, a lion, an owl, and a rabbit. I never knew why, but I couldn't bring myself to throw them away." "I have the originals here," Claire replied. "I haven't used them since that night." Thomas cleared his throat, his voice choked. "In the letter Mom left for me, she said I've always been the protector, ever since I was little. She asked me to keep taking care of my siblings, but to learn to accept help too. I guess that's why that night, even though I was so afraid, something made me trust you." Claire discovered that the Andersons not only adopted the children, but kept Marie's memory alive. Jane Anderson, the adoptive mother, saved every document, every photo, every piece of Marie's story to share with the kids one day. "They gave us all the love in the world," Sophie explained, "but they never tried to replace Mom. They always told us stories about her, kept her memory alive." "And now," Paul added, "we've realized there's more to learn. We'd love to hear how she was when she was young." "What was she like in school?" Claire smiled through tears. "She was just like you, determined, kind, always thinking of others. I have so many stories to share." "Claire," Thomas interrupted gently, "we'd like to meet you in person. Can we come tomorrow?" Claire's heart leapt. Of course, and I have something for each of you, 15 years worth of gifts, 1 for each birthday." Another moment of emotional silence passed before Sophie spoke. "We have something for you too, Mom's diary. We think you should have it." Claire glanced at Marie's photo again, her favorite student, Elizabeth's daughter, who had planned everything to the final detail, choosing Claire for that crucial night, knowing she would protect her children and buy them enough time to find safety. "See you tomorrow, then," Claire whispered, her heart brimming with love for this family destiny had woven so unexpectedly into her life. After hanging up, Claire went to the kitchen. The 3 mugs still stood on her shelf, silent witnesses to a night that changed so many lives. Beside them, Sophie's drawing smiled from the wall, 5 stick figures, once an incomplete family, but now, 15 years later, finally finding its missing pieces. The next morning, while Claire tidied the house to receive the Anderson siblings, the doorbell rang. It was too early to be them. Yet, when she opened the door, she found only a brown envelope lying on the welcome mat. With trembling hands, Claire picked up the envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, and her name was written in a handwriting she would recognize anywhere. Marie's delicate script, with those signature loops on the E's that had caught her eye in every essay. Claire carried the envelope to her favorite armchair, the one with a view of the garden. Morning sunlight filtered through lace curtains, creating dancing patterns on the aged paper as she carefully opened it. Inside was a letter dated July 9th, one day before that fateful night. Dear Claire, if this letter has reached you, it means my final plan worked. It means you found my little angels in the rain, and, knowing your heart, I'm sure you helped them. So I write with trembling hands, partly because of the illness consuming my body, but mostly because of the emotion of finally confessing everything. The doctor says I have only a few days, maybe hours. The cancer spread faster than we hoped. After losing David in the accident, I thought nothing could hurt more. I was wrong, but I can't give in to despair. I have 3 reasons to stay strong until the end. Thomas, my little protector, so much like you in his determination to care for others. Sophie, my quiet artist, who finds beauty in the darkest days. And Paul, my baby, who has your gentle eyes. Claire, the same eyes that welcomed me when I lost my own mother. I've spent months planning every detail. I found a wonderful family, the Andersons. They promised to keep my children together, to love them and give them the opportunities they deserve. But there was one missing piece, a necessary bridge between this painful present and the future I dream for them. That bridge is you, Claire. Remember the school play? I was the fairy godmother with that colorful umbrella you helped me decorate. You told me sometimes the most powerful magic comes from the simplest gestures, a single umbrella in a storm, a cup of hot chocolate, a hug at the right time. I've watched your routine these past weeks. I know every Thursday you return late from physical therapy, passing by that particular street. Tomorrow, I will leave my children there. It sounds cruel, but it's my final act of love. They need a memory of kindness to hold on to, a beacon of hope to guide them. I chose you, Claire, because you taught me more than literature. You taught me about unconditional love when you held my hand at my mother's funeral, about courage when you faced the school board to defend a wronged student, about perseverance when, even after retiring, you kept tutoring children in need. I left instructions with the Andersons to deliver this letter only when the time was right. If you're reading this, it means my children didn't just survive, they thrived. Knowing you, I bet you never forgot them. Knowing my children, I'm sure they turned that night of pain into something meaningful. There's so much I wish I'd said. So many Sundays I skipped tea because guilt consumed me. You were like a second mother to me, Claire, and I ran away. But now, at the end, I've come home. Through my children. Thomas has your strength. Sophie has your sensitivity. Paul has your kindness. Take care of them tonight, Claire. Give them a piece of the love you always gave me. The Andersons will do the rest. It's all arranged. I left a journal with them, telling our story. One day, when my kids are old enough to understand, they'll know they weren't abandoned on a stormy night. They were entrusted to an angel, my guardian angel, who will now be theirs for one night. I have one last request. Don't blame yourself for not finding me all these years. This was how it needed to be. Sometimes we must be lost so that others can be found. The sun is rising now, and with it my certainty that I've made the right choice. Tomorrow, when the rain falls, yes, I've obsessively checked the forecast, a colorful umbrella will shelter my greatest treasures once more. With all the love in the world, your eternal student, Marie P. Xiaotu, the mugs with animals were no coincidence. Remember when you used them to explain the different kinds of courage, the lion for the courage to lead, the owl for the courage to be wise, and the rabbit for the courage to be gentle even when afraid. I hope my children learned those lessons that night. Claire let the letter fall into her lap, tears coursing freely down her cheeks. Memories flooded her mind. Teenage Marie sitting in this very room, sipping hot chocolate from those same mugs, sharing her dreams and fears. She rose slowly, walking to the kitchen. On the wall, Sophie's drawing seemed different now. It wasn't just a picture of an incomplete family, but a map of destiny, carefully drawn by a mother who loved beyond death. The doorbell rang again. This time, when Claire opened the door, she found 3 pairs of green eyes she knew so well. Marie's eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, her own eyes, all mixed in a legacy of love that spanned generations. Thomas, Sophie, and Paul stood on her doorstep, each holding a mug identical to the ones she kept on her shelf. A lion, an owl, a rabbit. The circle was complete. "Welcome back," Claire whispered, opening her arms. And just like that stormy night 15 years ago, 3 lost souls found their way home. Claire sat at her old desk, a blank sheet of paper before her. The pen trembled slightly in her hand as she considered the right words to begin. How do you explain to 3 people that you've been part of their invisible lives for 15 years? After several botched attempts, she started to write. "Dear Thomas, Sophie, and Paul, you may not remember me, but I have never forgotten you. I'm the lady with the colorful umbrella from the stormy night. The one who gave you hot chocolate in animal mugs. I saw you on TV yesterday talking about the Umbrella Project. I'd recognize those green eyes anywhere. The same eyes as your mother, Marie, my dearest student." At the Umbrella Project's office, Thomas was reviewing documents when his assistant walked in with a cream-colored envelope. The paper was of fine quality, and the handwriting, elegant yet slightly shaky, immediately drew his attention. "This arrived with priority," she explained. "The messenger said it was urgent." Thomas examined the envelope, a strange chill running down his spine at the sight of the sender's name, Claire Lambert. Something about it awoke a distant memory: hot chocolate, the sound of rain, a feeling of safety. "Sophie, Paul," he called over the intercom, "could you come to my office? Right now." Meanwhile, Claire continued her letter. "That night, when I found you soaked under that awning, something in my instincts told me to stop. Thomas, you were holding your siblings so tightly, trying to shield them from the rain with a piece of cardboard. Sophie had that crumpled drawing in her pocket. I still have it, framed in my kitchen. And Paul, so little, was the first to trust me." Sophie arrived first, sketchpad under her arm, as always. Paul came right behind, adjusting his reading glasses. They found their older brother standing by the window, holding an open envelope. "You need to see this." Thomas's voice sounded strange, choked. In the letter, Claire went on, "During these 15 years, I kept your mugs just as you left them that morning. The lion for Thomas, always the protector. The owl for Sophie, the observant one. And the rabbit for Paul, with his innocent trust. Each birthday that passed, I bought presents I was never able to give you. But most important, I need you to know about your mother. Marie didn't abandon you. She brought you to me, knowing I would care for you on that crucial night." The 3 siblings read together, silent tears rolling down their faces. Sophie was the first to break down, her sobs echoing through the room as she reached the part about the drawing. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember drawing that at her kitchen table. 5 people, I always wondered why." Paul took off his glasses, wiping them nervously. "The hot chocolate, sometimes I dream about that taste. I thought it was just my imagination." Thomas kept reading aloud, his voice cracking at times. "I know you've built wonderful lives. The work you do with the Umbrella Project is exactly what your mother would have done, turning pain into hope, darkness into light. She'd be so proud of you, as I am. If you wish, I'd love to meet you in person. I have so many stories to tell about your mother, so many memories to share, and 15 years of gifts waiting for you. My address and phone number are below. The choice is yours. With love, Claire," the lady with the colorful umbrella. The silence in the office was thick with emotion. Paul walked over to the shelf where they stored special mugs, ones they insisted on bringing from home to the office, never understanding exactly why. "It's no coincidence," he murmured, touching the painted rabbit. It never was. Sophie opened her sketchpad, flipping to a drawing she'd done years ago, a colorful umbrella sheltering 3 small figures from the rain. "I've been drawing this for as long as I can remember. I thought it was just a dream." Thomas picked up his phone, his hands trembling slightly. "We need to see her. Now." Across town, Claire was sealing the envelope when her phone rang. The number was unknown, but her heart recognized it. "Hello?" she answered, voice shaking. "Claire?" Thomas's voice was exactly how she imagined it might be. "This is Thomas Anderson. We just read your letter." "Oh, Thomas," Claire whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "We're coming over," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Sophie's grabbing the mugs. Paul won't stop crying, and I just wanted to say thank you for never forgetting us." Claire glanced at her shelf, where the 3 mugs had stood patiently for 15 years. "I could never forget you, my dear, never." "We'll be there in 30 minutes, Thomas informed her. "Do you have hot chocolate?" Claire smiled through her tears. "And cinnamon cookies, too." Some habits never die. After hanging up, Claire went to her kitchen. She put milk on to warm and reached for the same brand of cocoa powder she used 15 years ago. Her hands still trembled, but her heart felt lighter than it had in ages. On the wall, Sophie's drawing seemed to smile at her. Those 5 stick figures would finally make sense. The incomplete family was about to be whole, and this time there would be no question marks where faces should be. Outside, storm clouds gathered. Claire smiled at the sky. It seemed fate had a peculiar sense of humor. 15 years later, another storm was coming, but this time there would be no separation, only a long-awaited reunion, sealed with hot chocolate, special mugs, and a love that never stopped existing. The doorbell rang exactly 30 minutes later. Claire adjusted her pearl necklace, the same she'd worn that night, and went to the door. Her hands shook so much that she needed 2 tries to turn the knob. When the door opened, time seemed to stand still. There they were, not the 3 frightened children from the storm, but 3 adults who carried traces of those same children in their faces. Thomas, now tall and poised, held a bouquet of blue hydrangeas, the same ones that grew in the front garden. Sophie, a graceful young woman, clutched a folder Claire recognized as her old sketchbook. And Paul, no longer a baby but still with those curious eyes, held something that made Claire's heart skip a beat. A brown teddy bear, identical to the one she kept in her guest room. "We found it in a box of memories," Paul explained, his voice unsteady. "Mom had kept its twin." Claire covered her mouth with her hands, tears escaping her eyes. "I have its sibling upstairs." No more words were needed for a while, only hugs. Thomas was first, his strong arms enveloping Claire as though making up for 15 years of missed embraces. Sophie joined in, softly sobbing. Paul completed the circle, and for a moment they were simply 4 souls reunited by fate on a stormy night. In the kitchen, the aroma of hot chocolate filled the air. Claire had prepared everything just as on that night. The same brand of cocoa, the same cinnamon cookies. On the table were 6 mugs waiting, the 3 originals she had saved, and 3 the siblings had brought from their office. "I can't believe you kept everything the same," Sophie whispered, touching her old owl mug. "You know, whenever it rained at night, I dreamed of hot chocolate. It was the only thing that calmed me." "Our adoptive mother tried many recipes," Paul added, a wavering smile on his lips. "But it was never quite the same. There was something special here." Claire poured the hot chocolate into the mugs, her hands steadier now. "The secret is adding cinnamon when the milk boils," she revealed. "Your mom, Marie, loved it that way too." Thomas looked at the drawing on the wall, the one Sophie had made so long ago. "You know, when we started the umbrella project, we didn't fully grasp why that symbol was so important to us. Now it all makes sense." Claire sat, motioning for them to join her. "Tell me about the project." "It was Thomas's idea," Sophie explained, opening her folder, "but I think it started that night. Look at this." She showed a series of sketches, colorful umbrellas, steaming mugs, a gray-haired lady with a gentle smile. "I've been drawing these scenes for years, trying to figure out if they were memories or dreams." "And I," Paul continued, placing his teddy bear next to the one Claire fetched from the guest room, "always felt compelled to create safe spaces. In school, I was known as the kid who helped new students who felt lost. Thomas picked up his lion mug, studying the design faded by time. When we learned the full truth about our story through Mom's journal, something clicked. We realized that night wasn't just about finding shelter from the rain. It was about unconditional love, Sophie finished, about how a single act of kindness can change entire lives. Claire stood and walked to a cabinet in the living room. She returned with a large decorated box. I saved these for you, actually, a lot of things. Inside were 45 carefully wrapped gifts, 15 for each child, 1 for each missed birthday. Each package had a date and a small note explaining why that gift was chosen. "Oh, Claire," Sophie sobbed, picking up a package with her name. The note read, "For your 10th birthday, a watercolor set because your mother also loved painting the world with colors." Paul found one labeled with his date, "For your 8th birthday, a small telescope because you were so fascinated by the sky that night." Thomas held a larger package. "For your 15th birthday, a photo album of your mother in school, back when she too protected everyone around her." "I never stopped thinking about you," Claire admitted, her voice quavering. "Every accomplishment I saw in the news, every article about young entrepreneurs, I looked for you. And we," Thomas responded, "never stopped looking for you. We built the Umbrella Project around the memory of that night, the idea that sometimes all someone needs is a cup of hot chocolate and a safe place to call home." Sophie got up and walked to the wall where her old drawing hung. Next to it, she placed a new one, the same group of 5 people, but now with completed faces, all smiling, all together. "We're not an incomplete family anymore," she said softly. Rain began to pour outside, a gentle drizzle turning into a storm. But this time there was no fear or separation, only the comforting sound of laughter, the clinking of mugs, and the sweet scent of chocolate and cinnamon filling a home that, at last, felt whole. Paul set the 2 teddy bears side by side on the shelf, beside the 6 mugs, 3 worn by daily use, 3 preserved by time. "I think they've also been waiting a long time for this reunion." "Just like us," Claire smiled, her heart overflowing with love. "But some waits are worth it." Outside, the storm continued, but inside that kitchen, where 3 frightened children once found refuge, now a family celebrated its reunion. The colorful umbrella that had sheltered them that night had transformed into something far greater, a symbol of hope that would continue to protect other lost children in the rain, thanks to a love that began with a cup of hot chocolate and a kind act on a stormy night. Night fell, but no one seemed to notice time passing in Claire's living room. The hot chocolate had been refilled several times, and the cinnamon cookies were just crumbs on the porcelain tray. It was time to share the story hidden for 15 years. "After they took us from the station," Thomas began, his voice deep with memories, "we stayed at a temporary shelter for 3 days. I wouldn't let go of Sophie's hand, and Paul cried every night calling for Grandma." Sophie reached for her older brother's hand, an automatic gesture even after all these years. Then the Andersons appeared, Jane and Michael. "I remember our first meeting. Jane brought me a sketch pad and colored pencils, and a yellow rubber duck for me," Paul smiled, his eyes shining at the memory. "Just like the one you had in the bath, Claire." Claire wiped away a silent tear. The Andersons had thought of every detail to make the children feel at home. "They never tried to erase our past," Thomas continued. "On the contrary, Jane kept everything in a special box. Photos of Mom, her journal, even newspaper clippings about the Umbrella Project when we started. Michael taught us about business," Paul explained, adjusting his glasses. "But it was Jane who showed us how to use it to help others. She's a pediatrician, you know, working with vulnerable children." Sophie opened her sketchpad again, revealing more recent designs. "This was our first shelter." She pointed to a drawing of a building with a big, colorful umbrella on the front. "We started small, just a safe space for children to spend the night." "Like your home was for us," Thomas said, looking at Claire meaningfully. "The idea grew naturally," Paul added, his enthusiasm evident. "We realized that just providing a roof wasn't enough. We needed education, psychological support, family follow-up. Each Umbrella Project shelter has a special kitchen, Sophie grinned. "With personalized mugs for each child, and there's always hot chocolate and cinnamon cookies available." Claire covered her face with her hands, overcome with emotion. Her small act of kindness had multiplied in ways she'd never imagined. "The Andersons supported us every step," Thomas went on. "Michael used his business contacts to get initial funding, and Jane developed the medical and psychological care protocols. But the most important thing," Paul interjected quietly, "was how they kept Mom's memory alive. On every stormy night, Jane made hot chocolate. On every anniversary of Mom's passing, we visited her grave with flowers." Sophie pulled a photo from her folder. 3 siblings with a middle-aged couple, all smiling in front of a brand new building. "This is from the opening of our 10th shelter last year. Jane and Michael never miss an inauguration. They taught us that family isn't just blood," Thomas reflected. "It's choice, it's love, it's commitment. Like you chose to help us that night, Claire. Like they chose to keep us together." "The Umbrella Project has helped more than 5,000 children," Paul shared, his eyes shining. "Each one gets a teddy bear on their first day, just like the one I left here. And we keep records of all of them," Sophie added, "because the Andersons taught us how important it is to preserve stories and maintain connections." Thomas stood and walked to the window. The rain had subsided, leaving behind the smell of wet earth. "You know, Claire, when we started the project, we thought it was just about giving children shelter. Then we realized it was about something bigger. It was about building bridges," Paul finished, "between past and future, between pain and hope. Between people who got lost and needed to find each other," Sophie concluded, looking at Claire significantly. Claire stood slowly, walking to her bookshelf. She retrieved an old photo album and brought it back to them. "I'd like to show you something," she said, opening to the first pages. "This is your mom at 16, no, during the school play." The 3 siblings leaned in, captivated. In the faded photo, a teenage Marie beamed, holding a colorful umbrella decorated with ribbons. "She was the fairy godmother in the show," Claire explained, her voice thick with emotion. "She said she wanted to spread magic in the world. And look at what you've done. You turned her magical umbrella into a symbol of hope for thousands." "We have a dream," Thomas shared, "to have an umbrella project in every major city, a place where lost children can find not just shelter, but love." "Like we did," Sophie whispered. "Twice," Paul added. "First with you, Claire, then with the Andersons." Claire closed the album gently, storing that moment in her heart. "Your mother would be so proud. Elizabeth, your grandmother too." "Can you tell us more about them?" Sophie asked, eyes gleaming with curiosity. "And about you," Thomas added. "How you became a teacher, your memories of Mom as a student." "We want to know every part of this story," Paul said. "Not just the stormy night, but everything before and after." Claire smiled, feeling her heart lighter than it had in years. "Well, I suppose we'll need more hot chocolate for that." "It's a long story." As she rose to make more hot chocolate, she looked at the 3 adults in her living room, no longer the terrified children from the storm, but extraordinary individuals who had channeled their pain into purpose. The kitchen still smelled of cinnamon and memories, but now those memories belonged to all of them, shared and multiplied, turned into a legacy of love that stretched far beyond that stormy night 15 years ago. The autumn sun cast golden shadows on the pavement as Thomas's car wound through the familiar streets of the old neighborhood. Claire, seated in the passenger seat, noted the changes 15 years had brought. The abandoned store was now a modern cafe. The trees were taller, but something in the atmosphere remained the same. "The Andersons still live in the same house," Sophie explained from the back seat, wedged between Paul and a picnic basket filled with Claire's freshly baked cinnamon cookies. Thomas slowed the car, and Claire felt her heart skip a beat. They were on that street. Her eyes automatically searched for the old awning, now replaced by the cafe's elegant facade. "Right there," she said softly. "That's where I found you." The car stopped in front of a red brick house with white windows and a well-kept garden. Anne Anderson was already waiting on the porch, an elegant woman with graying hair and kind eyes, that immediately filled with tears upon seeing Claire. "Finally," Anne whispered, descending the steps to hug Claire. "Finally, I can thank you in person." Michael Anderson appeared in the doorway, tall and distinguished in a navy sweater. His smile was warm, but Claire noticed a hint of restrained emotion in his eyes. The Andersons' living room felt cozy, walls lined with family photos of the three siblings at various ages. Claire observed their evolution, graduations, trips, the umbrella project's openings, a happy family. "Would you like some tea?" Anne offered, her hands trembling as she held a porcelain tray. "Actually," Claire smiled, opening her basket, "I brought some cinnamon cookies. I thought we might share memories." Anne froze, eyes fixed on the cookies. Michael approached gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I think it's time," he said softly. "They need to know." Anne nodded, setting the tray on the coffee table. "Come with me," she said, leading them to the large living room window overlooking the street. Thomas, Sophie, and Paul exchanged puzzled looks, but followed their adoptive mother. Claire felt a strange chill run down her spine. "That night," Anne began, her voice trembling, "I was standing right here, exactly here." The silence that followed was thick with 15 years of secrets. "It was raining so hard," she continued, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the glass. "I've always had trouble sleeping during storms. Michael was out of town on business, and I was alone. Then I saw 3 small figures sheltering under the old store awning." Claire felt her legs wobble. Paul quickly brought a chair for her to sit. "I watched," Anne confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I saw how the oldest tried to protect the other 2 with a piece of cardboard. I saw when the little one started coughing. I thought about going down there to help, but—" Her voice broke. Michael continued, "At that time, we were in a different place, more cautious, perhaps more selfish. We had just received another rejection for adoption. Then," Anne resumed, turning to face Claire, "I saw your car stop. I saw you get out with your colorful umbrella without a second's hesitation. I saw how you knelt in the rain, how you offered them your sweater, how you gained their trust so naturally." Sophie covered her mouth with her hand, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Thomas stood motionless, eyes on the window as if he could see the scene replaying. "I watched everything," Anne said, "how you put them in your car, how Thomas looked back one last time before getting in. And then you drove off, and I stayed here, paralyzed by my own remorse. I couldn't sleep that night," she went on. "In the morning, when I heard that 3 children had been taken to the station, something inside me awoke. Michael came home that afternoon, and I told him everything, about the kids, about you, about how your courage had simultaneously shamed me and inspired me." Michael held his wife's hand. "Anne insisted we go to the station immediately, not to adopt them at first, just to make sure they were okay. But when we got there, Anne sobbed, we learned about Marie, about her terminal illness, about how she planned everything. And I knew in that moment that this was our chance for redemption, to do the right thing we hadn't had the courage to do that night." Paul approached Anne, hugging her gently. "So that's why you chose us?" "No," Anne replied, wiping her tears. "We didn't choose you. Claire's example chose us. That night changed everything, our perspective on courage, on responsibility, on love." Thomas seemed to be processing the information slowly. "Is that why you insisted on staying in this house, even when we could afford a newer neighborhood?" "Yes," Michael confirmed. "Anne said we needed to keep the memory of that night alive, of that moment of transformation." Sophie walked to the window, pressing her hand against the glass. "All those stormy nights when you made hot chocolate, they weren't just for us, were they? It was because of this night, right?" Anne nodded. "Each time it rained, I returned to this window. I replayed that scene. 3 frightened children, a lady with a colorful umbrella, a moment of grace that changed so many lives." Claire stood and joined Anne by the window. "You weren't a coward," she said softly. "You were just human. And what matters isn't the moment of hesitation, but everything you did afterward. 15 years of love, dedication, and care. But you didn't hesitate, Anne argued. Not for a second. Claire smiled sadly. Maybe because I'd already missed too many chances in life, with Marie, with my own distant son. Sometimes we have to lose a lot to learn to act without fear. Thomas moved closer, wrapping his arms around both women, his two mothers, one the result of a night of courage, the other shaped by remorse that blossomed into unconditional love. That's why every Umbrella Project shelter has big windows, he revealed. So no one ever has to just watch from a distance when they see someone in need. Paul picked up the cinnamon cookies Claire had brought. Their sweet aroma filled the room, mingling with the tears and smiles of a secret kept for so long. I think we need some hot chocolate, Sophie suggested, her voice trembling, to celebrate not just the reunion, but also the truth that finally came to light. While Anne and Sophie prepared the drinks in the kitchen, Claire stayed by the window, gazing at the street where it all began. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new generation of children played on the sidewalk, their laughter echoing promises that the cycle of love and courage would go on. 15 years ago, two women witnessed the same scene from different angles. One acted, one hesitated. But fate, in its infinite wisdom, turned both moments, action and hesitation, into something bigger than themselves. A family united not just by blood or adoption papers, but by the redemptive power of love born of courage, and sometimes of regret. It was an autumn evening, exactly 1 year after the revelations that changed so many lives. The cafe that replaced the abandoned store had been transformed into the newest community center of the Umbrella Project. Its large windows, now decorated with colorful umbrellas, lit the street with a welcoming glow. At 84, Claire sat in her special armchair in the corner of the reception area, watching the bustle. The walls told stories through photographs: a young Marie with her fairy godmother umbrella, the three siblings as children on a stormy night, Anne at her window, and countless other moments weaving an extraordinary tapestry of lives intertwined. Thomas insisted this center be different from the others. Claire Lambert Community Center, read the plaque at the entrance, where every storm finds an umbrella. The decor merged elements of all the characters in this story: the animal mugs, the teddy bears, Sophie's drawings framed on the walls. Anne and Michael Anderson had donated their house to the project, moving into a small apartment within the center. It's our way of turning that window of hesitation into thousands of open doors, Anne had said during the opening. On this particular night, a severe storm lashed the city, reminiscent of that night 16 years earlier. Claire watched Anne through the same window, but now the scene was different. A young mother with 3 small children stood hesitantly outside the center. Without a second thought, Anne went out with a colorful umbrella, identical to the one Claire had used so many years ago. "It's cold out here," Claire heard Anne say through the security intercom. "We've got hot chocolate and cinnamon cookies inside." Sophie, who was running an art workshop on the second floor, came rushing down the stairs when she saw. Her eyes met Claire's, both recognizing the echo of the past in the present. The young mother, drenched and shaking, cradled a baby against her chest as 2 small children clung to her skirt. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You do now," Anne replied, offering not just the umbrella but also a helping hand. "And you're not alone." Paul, coordinating the center's educational program, swiftly organized the intake protocol he himself had devised based on his own experiences. Thomas, in his office on the 3rd floor, was already making calls to secure legal and psychological support for the newly arrived family. Claire watched it all with tear-filled eyes, her heart overflowing with pride and gratitude. In 16 years, her small act of kindness had multiplied in ways beyond her wildest dreams. This center wasn't just a temporary shelter. On the 2nd floor, Sophie held art therapy workshops, helping children process trauma through creativity, just as she had once done with her drawings. Paul's groundbreaking educational program ensured no child missed school, regardless of their situation. Thomas formed partnerships with local businesses, creating job opportunities for parents in vulnerable situations. Anne and Michael had turned their remorse into something positive, training volunteers to spot and help at-risk families. Sometimes all it takes is seeing another human being taking the first step, Anne would say in her lectures. This particular stormy night, the center was especially busy. In the communal kitchen, designed to replicate the warmth of Claire's old kitchen, volunteers made large pots of hot chocolate. Every new child received a personalized mug, a tradition started by 3 mugs, a lion, an owl, and a rabbit. Claire observed the young mother being welcomed, her children already smiling shyly as Paul entertained them with stories. The youngest couldn't be more than 3, the same age Paul had been that distant night. "You know what's most amazing?" Sophie remarked, sitting next to Claire with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. "It's not just about helping those in need. It's about showing everyone that kindness generates more kindness." As if to prove her point, the door opened again. An elderly neighbor, who always watched from her window, walked in carrying a stack of clean blankets. "I thought you might need these," she said timidly. "I saw that young family arrive and—" Anne hugged the woman, recognizing her own past in this hesitant gesture. "Sometimes we just need to see someone else doing good to find the courage to do the same," she replied gently. The night wore on, and the center kept receiving people, some needing help, others offering it. Claire watched in awe as each new act of kindness inspired another, each story of resilience encouraging more people to reach out a hand. Thomas had created a special display in the lobby called the Chain of Kindness, where visitors could share how a small gesture changed their lives. In the center of this display, in golden letters, was the story that started it all. On a stormy night, a retired teacher pulled over her car. Near midnight, when the storm finally began to subside, Claire gathered everyone in the main hall for the nightly ritual.